Hey man,
Hi.
how are you?
Oh wow, what a trip.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I'm not sure from a personal level sort of where to start, but of course for you, for me, there is the sort of more public issue of how we can sort of go about our work and that other massive part of our lives. And I guess that I don't know if you guys have been kind of creating and writing and in that process, but or were there gigs on the horizon, or was it all a bit murky?
Yeah, there were gigs. Um, Not many though. We had most of our gigs were last year, but we had about 30 gigs on for this year that we pulled.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, that's a sizable number.
yeah, yeah, no, so it's all right though. I mean, I think from the band point of view, um, things have got to a point now where we could take a couple of years off and everything would be okay.
Sure.
Um, it's been tricky trying to figure out how to look after the people around the band, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, and then just kind of more thinking about others. It's like people. It's natural to kind of think about how things impact you at your door, uh, but you sort of consider the wider world around us, and especially the music community, and that's where the impact's really sitting. Um,
Absolutely. You guys, yourself particularly, you and the guys, but you know about um, small venues and the experience early on in the journey and sort of going into pubs. This is something I know about as well. You know, going into pubs and small bars and small clubs and small venues as much and as often as you can, and in those weeks very early on where you've got 3 or 4 or 5 nights where you're playing, it really ends up in the grand scheme of things playing nicely into the buzz that you're trying to create. And for all of the, like you say, the problems at your doorstep or my doorstep, and then just beyond that you've got your touring team. There's also all those people out there. It's hit every from every angle.
yeah,
uh, all live music and all musician sort of opportunities outside of recording uh,
yeah,
and writing. And I mean, even just what I've said, it seems so massive. It's so hard to talk about. But
I
how
know.
managing to process that?
Not sure. I was sat on a panel yesterday, or like a webinar chat. It's all been quite weird, isn't it? Being also digitized.
Yeah.
And I was chatting to someone in Vancouver, someone in Mannheim, and someone in Vienna about and we all realised that it was exactly the same story everywhere. I think that's one of the hardest things to imagine is that these conversations are being had globally, and there isn't really like a precedent for that in our lifetime, where like all the local communities um, are basically having the same existential conversation, which is yeah. I and basically the takeaway from that hour-long chat was how do we remain positive? I mean, there's so much to come to terms with, and what you were saying about these pubs and small venues that you would learn, or that you would give you the opportunity to build up a bit of a fan base, but it's also where to make mistakes. You know,
Absolutely.
like I think I remember back to one of our first shows where um, Winston learnt that crowd surfing whilst playing the banjo was not going to be something that works in the future. Um,
Right.
there were loads of little, but also kind of just tweaking songs, and songs would live and die on those early stages before they even got to the studio, rather than like you end up in this bubble of creativity um, without any kind of information uh, that what you're saying makes sense. It's almost like you're just talking to a wall.
No,
Yeah.
just on that point, you're so right. And I thought recently about there's a sort of an even newer sort of 21st century, or even since probably about 2010, there's this new angle on how important those early shows are, like the one you're describing. We live in a world now where artists, sort of young up and coming budding songwriters and artists, can create a page for themselves online, and they can really get creative, and the production value can be pretty fantastic from someone's bedroom now, and they can get a following, and that's all very exciting. But the make or break almost for that longer, that broader music career that they might be going for, comes when they get on a stage for the first time and they really work out the kind of relationship they can have, the friction and the energy and the buzz they can create in a live space with real people, crowd, shoulder to shoulder, and engaging with the front row, engaging with the back row. It's wonderful and exciting that we live in a world where it can start kind of online for those artists, but I think that transition has to be made. At the moment, you've talked around this kind of point, and I'll say it like this. You said it based on the conversation you had earlier, the kind of international conversation you had earlier. There's no silver lining at the moment for when we'll be back in venues with a packed house. Let's say a packed house, because that's what everybody wants. That's what everybody's working towards.
Yeah.
And it's worrying. I suppose my point is that while there is this option to start things off online more than when you started or than when I started, it doesn't appreciate the fullest picture of what we all know and what we all want being an artist to be. It has a limit, and it also shows that yet again, the small stages and hopefully the big stages that people reach after them are so needed. We need live music.
So this is the B12 shot of positivity. Okay.
Oh, sorry, I brought it quite low.
It's important because I think hope is important, and we've been through a lot as human beings, and through everything, music has come through the other side of it. People getting together and putting an arm around one another and singing a song together, and that has lasted through wars and other pandemics and all sorts of crazy stuff. And the Spanish flu led to the 20s. And I imagine at that time, the idea of the 20s with jazz clubs like full of people.
The roaring 20s, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like dancing and discovering life and vitality in a way that it probably had never been discovered before. It just probably seemed really impossible to get their head around. So I do know, I feel like it's a fact that things will come back, and all we need to do, and it's I think it's two things. I think it's a financial challenge, and I think it's a mental health challenge. But all we need to do is to get from today to that point. And some people think that's going to be a couple of months. The most pessimistic people think it's going to be a couple of years. But it's not like we don't have to give up.
It's not eternity.
No, it's not. And people are saying, I've actually had some very bizarre conversations where people are saying, will we ever shake hands again? Or will there be a show, will Glastonbury ever be the same again? And the reality is that, of course they will. Like we will return to those things. It just is a matter of time. And between now and then, the challenge is how many of the venues, how many of the artists and promoters and managers and the people, the whole ecosystem, can we keep within? Can we keep afloat, both financially, but also I think like I said, the mental health piece is massive, because the creative industry is obviously full of creative people, and to be a creative person, you like to create. And it's not just a case of everyone's got a different version of creation, right? So if you're a songwriter, obviously you can write songs. It is possible to write songs right now. But if you're a lighting designer of arena tours,
Yeah.
it's a weird time, you know. And I just hope that we don't, like, that the risk is actually more in terms of people leaving the industry and trying to, like, find a new career.
Yeah.
You know?
I hear you, and I think that's realistic. Part of me doesn't want to even say that, because we don't want to sort of see people fall away from this industry they were part of, that we've all got to be a part of, and have to go and find new things. And I can, just out of hope and positivity, I can hope that this is something to talk about, for the venues that I hope don't get lost, but that we might lose, and the tours, and the people who have to sort of either maybe pause, or very sadly sort of call time on their musical journey. You hope for the teams and the slightly sort of peripheral, the lighting engineers, the people who are vital to the experience, or the front of house engineers or whatever, you hope that they can be kind of recycled and folded back in, maybe a little further down the line. Some of those people won't be able to wait for that time to pass to be folded back in. That's a whole difficult subject to discuss, given how little we know about when it'll all reform back into the thing that we have always known it as, and want it to be. But just thinking about those, I mean, you have your finger on the pulse of small venues in terms of what you've brought into London with O'Meara and Lafayette. I know Lafayette is so brand new.
I know.
I haven't actually been yet myself, but
Very few have.
Sorry?
Very few people have.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I when I was making a record earlier this year in Nashville, and a good friend of mine came out to take a load of photos. He was heading back at the end of my second week in the studio. He's not massively used to jet lag, so his plan was to land on the Tuesday, sleep as much as he could, get up on the Wednesday, go to work. And straight from work, he was going to Lafayette to see the Staves.
Okay.
And but it had all locked down by the time he got home, and I think the gig unfortunately had been cancelled. What am I trying to say? Well, we've already said it in a way. Those venues, I was lucky enough. Here's a point I want to make. I was lucky enough. We have been locked down all this time, and I went into wonderful O'Meara, where I've already had a billion fantastic memories, either as a punter or on the stage, to record something, a gig in support of, and the whole cause of small venues and all venues needing to be held onto and saved. And it was just such a bizarre experience. It was wonderful to be in that special room, but there was no one in there. And I was, I was reminded how important those spaces are. You have a big hand in these small spaces and supporting, I'll say this in a roundabout way, in supporting artists very much on their way up. I don't want to sort of highlight too much of the obvious. I can imagine it's just such an alarming time to have cared as much as you've cared and still care about all of that stuff, and have your hand in small venues.
Yeah.
And then the circumstances be what they are.
Yeah. No, it's been challenging, honestly.
Is it a waiting game? I suppose it is, but it's more than that, right?
Yeah. I mean, we're burning through. We're trying to keep as many jobs going as possible. I mean, the venues are two things. It's the environment that you create and design, which is obviously costly, and we have this kind of dream of building venues in a way that they were once built,
Right.
these, special places that were not just about kind of maximizing the return financially. It was all about like trying to build places that like special things can happen in them by really
Well,
the detail, like
yeah.
the six layers of the Omira walls was not the most sort of cost efficient way to build those walls, but it was like hoping to find something that was a reflection of the um, kind of complexity and the layers that go into building up artists' careers, and so that's one whole part of it. But the other bit, which is critical, is the people who work in these venues, and they are amazing because they work so hard. They and it's everyone from the technicians who are highly skilled and have dedicated their lives to understanding audio and lighting desks, and they work crazy shifts, being able to help artists be able to give a true representation of what they're trying to do to the audience. That's one part of it, and then we have the guys that are spending 8 hours carrying ice back and forth from the ice machine to making sure that you have a cold drink, and then you've got the people who are there making sure that everyone's safe at the front door, and it's mad. Like,
Yeah.
between the two venues, we've got just over 200 staff, and my biggest burden, honestly, is thinking, how do we make sure that that at least their jobs are protected?
Yeah.
And in doing so, you're right. Like, it does. Building these spaces provides an opportunity for artists, and I feel like I've reflected a lot, probably too much at my age, about the concept of legacy, and I'm really interested by it. Have you seen Hamilton?
It's literally on the list for like the night or
You've got to
so.
watch it now. It's on Disney.
Yes, that's why I saw it come up on Disney. I was like, right, we nearly watched it the other night, but
You've got to watch it. But I only just saw it for the first time. But anyway, there's like a whole thing in there that's about there's a thread in that show that's about legacy, and I am really interested by the legacy that we leave behind as writers and as musicians, but also like what we do beyond that. And I know that you can't really decide how long you're here for, and so I want to make sure that in the relatively short time that we have on Earth, that for me, it's important that there's something left that can be of use, of assistance, of help to others, that can then that's like leaving the world in a better place. And there's so many different ways that people can do that. And for me, that ended up making the most sense being building spaces that these things can happen. These moments can happen. I've seen it. It's incredibly rewarding knowing that for someone who like is standing in that room, shedding tears whilst you're sat performing on stage. It's like there's like that moment of connection, which I
it's absolutely. You couldn't be more sort of on it there, and this sense of it makes me, everything you've just said makes me think about, particularly with Omira, given it's what is it 4 years old.
Yeah.
But clearly, I'm sure with what you're going for with Lafayette, and to think about other small venues. I know you guys played at the Abbey Tavern in Kentish Town long time ago. I started out doing a lot of stuff there, as far as my sort of performing in London. The sense of community, I'll lean on Omira particularly here, because I've had so many great experiences there in the last 3 or 4 years. The sense of community that ripples through management teams, labels, all invested in artists in their early days, through social media between artists, and obviously among so many fans. A sense of community is already a legacy and already kind of legendary, which
Yeah.
which speaks to how vibrantly that atmosphere of new artists, debut artists, or maybe it is an artist just who's been around for a while but has a smaller following and plays those kind of rooms. That doesn't matter. It speaks to the sort of vibrant energy in those communities outside of the venue world. It brings it to a venue. It makes that venue, in this case O'Meara, in the context of this conversation, the hub and the home of so many incredible experiences and so much
Yeah.
music. And like,
Um,
we can't
yeah.
lose it. We cannot be losing that because of the I guess the way that sort of everybody's reacted to, well, let's say, the government and the country have sort of reacted to this unfortunate pandemic. All these things need to be focused on. Many things need to be focused on, but this certainly does.
And there's a real opportunity, I think, that I've enjoyed, which is to host people from further afield as well, and it can show off London culture, British culture, in a way that you've spent a lot of time in Nashville and that's because I imagine what Nashville resembles and the kind of the atmosphere that Nashville has.
Yeah.
And I think that London, I'm think about sort of 2 a.m. in the bar in O'Meara with Beth Ditto as she's teaching our bar staff how to line dance, or we spent the day out in flea markets looking around London trying to find like little trinkets to give Beck when he performed.
Wow.
And I saw him a year later after he did his performance, and he said that he'll never forget. We gave him like a little vintage suitcase of random trinkets of things that we thought he would like whether they were referenced in songs or interviews or whatever, just to say thank you. And I'm such a huge fan of his. And anyway, I like the idea that these venues do a job for us. They're like a window in to at least sort of welcome to London. And we've got, we are kind of a destination for artists globally. And I'm a little bit concerned about what that looks like in, they're saying 80% of venues are at risk right now. So you fast forward a year or two, and yeah, there might be, there's going to have to be venues. They're going to have, but will they be the same people that have? Will it have just been rolled up into some consolidated corporate mess, or will it still have that indie spirit where you can host people fully? I don't know.
No, I absolutely. That indie spirit, what a fantastic way to phrase it is. I'll phrase it like this, and I'll mean the same thing. It is the heart in live music, and it has to start somewhere. And I think it starts in these smaller places where everything, in its own unique way, is a certain kind of special. Everything you talk about there, your memory of Beth Ditto, your memory of Beck. I have memory, particularly of seeing Maggie Rogers at O'Meara, and it was her first London show. Her parents were there. There was 300 of us in the room. She's been on arena stages with you guys since. She's been around the world. It's been the greatest thing to watch. But to be stood by the sound desk in that room on that night, and O'Meara was maybe a year or two old, maybe at the time. Yeah. So it had that unique excitement as being a sort of buzzy new spot, and it's held to that heart and that indie spirit ever since. It's grown. That heart and that indie spirit has grown in that particular place since. And look at Shaw. Beck was already a legend when he played there, and Maggie's becoming one, and it reverberates around all of that music and all those artists.
Totally.
And we can't. I keep saying it, but we can't lose it. But I suppose the point is that when we talk about the indie spirit and the heart, that's the thing that needs to be really, really recognised going forward. If it's going to be a treacherous and tricky experience going forward, so that it isn't, like you say, a kind of weird corporate world of, well, we've got this capacity and we've got this capacity and we can make this one smaller. We don't want any of that. We want, we want a tequila bar. Amira.
Yeah.
We want Beck rolling through town, and we want Maggie and doing a set there, and we want Maggie Rogers being an exciting new talk of the world, doing her first London show there.
Yeah.
Or else the heart and the indie spirit are lost, and then I don't even want to think about what that is, that world.
I know, man. So it's a lot, but I think, as ever, you're doing everything you can to support, and it means a lot.
Sure.
Everyone feels it. Did you find that show that you did? You said it was strange, but beyond that, did you feel like there was anything to it that could work as a tie over for now?
Maybe actually, given somewhere like Omira, and a lot of the small venues have their following and they have that romance. So in a way, if the tie over is that we go into these places and we shout about the place and the small venues from the stage broadcasting online,
yeah,
it might be as simple as that, and just keep the messaging as kind of bang on as that, and as close to the space that you're in, and the cause that you're supporting. And all I can hope as a result of that, I'm kind of coming off the cuff here, but like, all I can hope as a result of that is that people will continue to recognize, as they sit in front of their laptop screen and watch, where the artist is, where they maybe once were or they haven't been yet, and therefore where they could go to when we do everything we can, be it raise funds or whatever, to get back to those venues. I think I'll say this as well as an answer to your question. Let's try, if it's feasible, to do less from, like I say, if it's feasible, to do less from home or living room, as charming as that is.
Yeah.
Let's do our broadcasts, our streams from these stages, even if the room's empty. It's the respect the room, the venues need paying. I felt it was odd. It was brilliant. It was gorgeous to be in there, but it was strange because it needed 200-300 people in it.
Yeah,
because that's the way that everybody loves it, and yet I'd rather. I'm trying to think of a great kind of analogy. I'd rather be in there on my own and broadcast the message of small venues and their importance to the world, than do it from my living room. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
It's not much of a tie over, but it's a start.
No, big time. Well, it's definitely appreciated, and I know it's sort of like, how do you differentiate between that and just rehearsing by yourself in a room mentally? And I think there's people trying to think of ways in which we can get some sort of feedback in that environment. I'm not sure whether it's even just having a few people. Laura Marling did this thing.
Oh yeah.
Well, not the Union Chapel thing, but a few years ago.
Sorry. Okay.
She did a secret cinema performance where it was just one person in the room, and just having that, at least that much interaction. At least you can have those moments in the songs, and maybe there's like, I'm completely with you that 100% audiences need to come back. That this idea of socially distanced shows is going to be so hard to get our head around, and I don't really believe that it's sort of even scientifically doesn't really make sense to me in terms of all the areas in which it would be weak. But maybe, again, there's a version of it in the meantime that we can safely get a couple of people. I don't know.
I'll say this. As I think about it, as you've asked, and I think about it, the experience in Omira on my own was like ripping a plaster off. It was like ripping off a Band-Aid. Now that I've done the one, now that I've had my sort of first experience, if it's all we can do between now and getting crowds back in, I'll do another. I'll support further in that way, because it's what I reckon it's what fans want the most from me. me on a stage performing the songs and a bit of chat in between, because it's what they get at a gig.
Yeah.
And until they can be in the room with me, they can actually enjoy pretty much all of those nuances and all of that in this way. And I've done one, so I appreciate that it was strange for me, and it would be strange for any artist. But I'm kind of over that now, so I'll do another. I think as I watched it back, we recorded it, and obviously, and as I watched it back, I did think about, you know, bands, groups of people. I was in there all on my own. It would all be, I think, a pretty lovely, at least halfway house between what we want and obviously what we can't have, what we have to sort of put up with at the moment, which is pretty much no gigs.
Yeah.
I think there's, you know, it's no gigs, but I think and look, I'll say this just to sort of kind of come to a more positive sort of end place. I spoke to someone in New Zealand this morning. Last night he went to a gig. Everybody was shoulder to shoulder. New Zealand, round of applause to them. They got on it nice and early. Good on them. And I just want to say that as a reaction, understanding your conversation that you had today with 4 people in different parts of the world, and how horrific really and desperate it is as far as the state of sort of gigging and concerts and live music. I hear that, and it's the case for 95%, you know, for the vast majority of the world. And New Zealand are sat over there having sort of done what they did, and they're doing shows now, and there's hope, like we said at the start, and we have to have it. We have to have we have to have hope, and we have to have live shows.
Yeah.
So
I hear you, man. Well, thank you for speaking up on it and getting into it all. It's also nice to feel that you share in these burdens, and the community has done a great job over the years of coming together, normally to help, and will continue to do, helping others, right? So music is historically, musicians are very good at stepping forward for climate issues, poverty issues, social issues, change, all that stuff. But doing a bit of help for each other right now is not such a bad thing. So
man, we have to remember music is the ultimate therapy. You know, we have to remember that as the musicians, and one of the ultimate therapies, I think. And for all of the barriers lately, there's action we can take now. And I enjoyed that in getting in the venue the other night, in getting into Omira and broadcasting this thing. If that's the kind of action we can take at the moment, let's explore that further. But thank you, man. Thank you so much for chatting, Ben. It's good to see you.
It's great to see you. Much love.
Soon.
That's it. Bye.
Take it easy, man.